Hi, I'm Annie Fitzsimmons. I'm your Washington REALTORS legal hotline lawyer. And the topic of today's video is Form 22 FM. And if you're thinking to yourself, hey, didn't she just do a Form 22 FM a video? The answer is yes, I did. But that was, about 10 days ago. And in this industry, in today's world, 10 days is a long time and a whole lot has happened. So let's talk about, under today's environment, how you use Form 22 FM, or better yet, if you need to use Form 22 FM. And the underlying message of this video is that in the garden variety residential real estate transaction today, you no longer need a Form 22 FM, and to use it simply adds confusion that's unnecessary. When Form 22 FM was first introduced, remember that the governor's order, Governor Inslee's order, stay home, stay healthy, was in effect, and it prohibited all in-person real estate brokerage services, including inspections and appraisals. And in many cases, recording offices were closed, so transactions couldn't close timely. For those reasons, the form was introduced for the first time ever in the history of Northwest MLS being our statewide forms producer. So if the form is important, why had Northwest MLS never introduced it previously? And the answer is because it's not typically important. It's not typically a provision that we need in a transaction. It was necessitated by the fact that it was impossible to perform certain real estate brokerage service activities. And because of that, it was impossible for the parties to perform some of the terms of an agreement. A force majeure event requires a literal impossibility. Not an inconvenience, not a delay, not something that's hard to schedule, but an impossibility. So when it was impossible for inspectors and appraisers to visit sellers' home, the force majeure addendum made sense. It's no longer an impossibility. I'm hearing from brokers who are saying that appraisers are backed up, inspectors are backlogged, it's hard to get them there in time. That's not an impossibility, and the Form 22 FM isn't going to kick in that instance anyway. Where it might trigger is if you have a recording office that's closed or so delayed that they're not closing transactions timely. And if that's the case, and if you had a Form 22 FM in your transaction, then it would just be the closing provision of the Form 22 FM that would be important. I'm hearing from some brokers that are saying we need the Form 22 FM in vacant land transactions, or even in case of construction, where those activities are still not permitted by the governor. And in those cases, we do have some actual impossible activities for the buyer and seller to undertake. And in that case, maybe you do need a 22 FM. Understand, however, that even in those instances, it may be difficult for buyer and seller to agree as to what is an impossibility, and ultimately litigation could be necessary. The better outcome in every case is for buyer and seller to attempt to negotiate an outcome that's acceptable to both parties. Maybe you need a closing delay. Maybe the buyer needs a few extra days for their feasibility study or their inspection contingency, whatever it is. To the extent you can help your parties negotiate the outcome, you're going to have a far better outcome than having to try and trigger the effect of the Form 22 FM. So again, garden variety, improved residential transaction, probably you don't need the Form 22 FM any longer. If you're in one of those counties where deeds can't record, it might be something you need to think about using still. Okay, I want to talk about something else in this video before I say goodbye, and that is something that's really been quite heartening. In my position as the legal hotline lawyer, I get to hear from brokers all over the state, good and bad. And one of the things that I've heard a lot lately is that brokers are reaching deep into their database and making contact with not only former clients, but just people within their database, friends, family that they might not have talked to or connected with for a long time. And they're making meaningful phone conversations and finding enormous gratitude on both sides of the phone line, both the caller and the receiver of that call, for a connection point from the broker who simply reaches out to say, hey, how are you doing? I care about you as a human being and I want to know that you're okay. I'm not calling with an agenda. I'm not trying to sell you a house or sell your house. I just want to know how you're doing. And brokers are finding that the people they're calling so appreciate hearing from them in a really stressful time like this. The other database connection I'm hearing about is brokers who are using remote services to connect with their clients in a variety of different real estate brokerage settings. For example, presenting a listing. And I want to tell you some of the insights that I've heard other brokers describe to me as so important during remote delivery of real estate brokerage services, things that they've learned just in the last few days. Simple ideas, like for example, when you're going to make a presentation remotely, treat it like a real presentation. Take a shower, get dressed, put on makeup if that's necessary, comb your hair if that's necessary. Present yourself in a professional way that you would if the seller was sitting right across the table from you. And then in your office that the seller can see on the camera, present a professional setting. Clear off the space, whatever the space is going to be. Maybe it's your in-home office, maybe it's your dining room table. Whatever space you're using as your professional office space at the moment, make it look professional. Clear away the clutter. And then turn off all the other distractions. If there's a TV on, turn it off. If you've got your cell phone sitting beside you, flip it over. If you've got an extra computer monitor on, turn it off so that you're not getting distracted by emails or text messages that are coming in. And be fully involved with your client. In advance of your meeting, email them all of the documents that you want them to have in advance. There might be some things you don't want them to have in advance. Maybe you want to present the broker's price opinion during the presentation and not have them see it in advance. Maybe you want to present your flyer identifying all of the services you can provide to them at the meeting itself. For all of those things, make sure that the system you're using has a screen share capacity within it. Share your screen with your seller so that you can go over the broker's price opinion with them, for example. Or when it comes time to reviewing the listing contract, they can have the hard form in front of them because you emailed it to them in advance and they printed it out. Maybe they even wrote questions on the face of it. You can go over it, screen sharing it with them, provision by provision, and they can follow along on their copy. And in that, connect with your seller, answer their questions in real time, but from your own home, with them in their home, staying home and staying healthy. If you have questions, fun stories, happy outcomes, anything you'd like to share, I'd love to hear from you. Legal Hotline at warealtor.org. Thank you for being a Washington REALTORS member.